why India will never achieve a growth rate like China of 9 or 10%. Like in terms of, we have, I think, all now reconciled to the fact that we are a 6% type economy. The ambition of growing at 9-10%, I think, doesn't even exist anymore. And partly it's because of the recognition that in a country like India,
when you look at China or Singapore today and you compare them to India of today, what do you think is working for them that we could incorporate?
I'm not sure our democracy can incorporate this. Like about China, I say that once again, we think of China so much as a command and control economy. Like as you said, possibly communist, but a very command and control economy. As far as China is concerned, like we forget some basic stuff about China. For example, in the 1990s, this is one thing which I find very fascinating. China fired 90 million people from its state-owned enterprises. Fired. And they told their people, there's no welfare state. You do what you want. Go find a job wherever you have. And a lot of people lost their jobs, but they all migrated much more towards the coastal cities because that's where the big growth was happening naturally, because that's where the exports happen, the manufacturing, exports all happen there. So they all moved towards the coastal cities. But can you imagine that China firing 90 million people from its state-owned enterprises?
What era was this?
This 1990s. There's no way that we could do something like that. And also opening up Singapore, so much open to trade, no tariffs, no protectionism, just make the country and the people ruthlessly competitive. So a lot of what we can learn is that how do you sort of promote this kind of almost ruthless competition, which may appear to be heartless at some level, but also is something which is at the core of capitalism and it promotes very high economic growth and development. So I think that's what Singapore and China did. Much of East Asia did that.
Right.
That's the contrast with India. Like India gave its people lots of political freedom, that you can vote and the way you want and you have democracy. These countries did not give their people much political freedom, but they gave their people much more economic freedom compared to India. So I think this was the big contrast between these countries. And even arguably today, that is still the case.
I was watching this interview between Tucker Carlson and a Chinese lady. Very interesting. She was speaking for Deng Xiaoping and she said the manner in which he brought 500 million people out of poverty in a way, given the same, this is a bit controversial, but she was saying if one were to give Mother Teresa the same amount of money, most of those 500 million people would still be in deep, abject poverty in a way. Do you think that kind of a model of welfareism is bad for a country like India?
I think that if you look around the world, and this is something which I've seen, that creating a welfare state prematurely can be one of the biggest mistakes any developing country can make. And you can see this. Latin America did that. Latin America, like all these countries, for example, in the 1960s, Korea, India, Brazil, they all had similar per capita income, which means that they were similarly rich or poor, whichever way you want to look at it. But then Korea really took off. Brazil kept on stagnating and India took a very long time to get going. But the biggest mistakes that I think that Brazil made, and this is my point, that creating a welfare state prematurely, where the state just spends on, people by giving them freebies and giving them a lot of subsidies and stuff, I think is a mistake. Whereas the way that growth is created is by creating the infrastructure, that you create the infrastructure and then let people thrive and do what they want with that infrastructure, which means build the roads, build the ports, build the highways and stuff. So that's what the East Asian model was. No welfare state to start with. Spend whatever the government spent on. It's spent on building infrastructure. And then you create the welfare state later, which is that once you have enough money and people have enough, income, then to cushion them in the hard times, you create a welfare state. And that was also something which happened in the West as well. That if you look at America or UK and stuff, they followed what we call the Dixonian form of capitalism after Charles Dickens. All the books we read as kids and stuff of Oliver Stone and all these things. It showed what the abject poverty used to be at one level and how the rich used to really sort of rule.
So are we there yet? Have we reached that point, India as a country?
I think that India has always sort of the risk that why India will never achieve a growth rate like China of 9 or 10%. Like in terms of, we have, I think, all now reconciled to the fact that we are a 6% type economy. The ambition of growing at 9, 10%, I think, doesn't even exist anymore. And partly it's because of the recognition that in a country like India, our society, or whether it's our politics or what, is never going to ever allow that sort of runaway growth to take place, which requires very little welfare and any government spending on infrastructure, and also very little protection from what's happening internationally. Like you allow foreign capital to come, you don't have much of tariffs and stuff like that. I think it's very difficult in this country to have that sort of model. So that's the reason why India is unlikely to ever grow at 9, 10% on a sustained basis, which East Asia did, and why we are now reconciled to growing at 6%. That type of growth rate is what we are seems to be what we are comfortable with.
So what did China do different?
As I said, that what China did was that it built this massive infrastructure so that it became very easy to ship goods out of the country. And also in terms of its people, it just told people that you go and find a job wherever you want. The state is not going to, in terms of give you support to remain on the farm.
Right.
So you go find whatever you want. Now in India's case, the politics is very different here. In fact, where now it's become a routine thing that this thing like Manrega and stuff, right? Which is what the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Now, the way that it functions is, and you can argue that it's very, that it's maybe the right thing for India to do given its democratic setup and the polity here. But they, like in China's case, didn't have any Manrega and things. They just told their people that if you can't make enough money on the farm, go to the city, find a job, join whatever manufacturing sector you have to, and produce whatever you have to. So it was a very ruthless form of capitalism, in fact, you can argue, that they followed.
Which worked.
Which worked, exactly. And we don't have the capacity to do that. And therefore, we'll never grow at a rate of more than 6% on a sustained basis, has been my view for a very long period of time.
Which is not probably enough because of our base.
Yeah. Our per capita income is, barely $3,000.
Yeah. And they say if you remove the richest 1,000 people, that number drops significantly.
Which is true for any country, by the way. It's not just our thing, it's true. But generally, I'm trying to say that, is that if we want, that why can we not grow further than that is because of this reason. This is the number one reason, I would say.